They want to thank everybody for joining us.
We're all trapped in.
If anybody's ever been to our panels before, we love interacting with everyone. Please raise your hand. We'd love to hear your comments. Mike, you're actually running this show. You want to get the party started?
Howdy everyone, my name is Mike Gordon. I am the track director. I have to check. So it's been that kind of day. I am the track director here at Monsterama for the arts and literature and comics. I think this qualifies as all three. And I am happy to welcome you to day 2 of Monsterama 2026, and we are here.
Yeah!
And we are here for a celebration 50 years of Starlog magazine, which is something that is near and dear to a lot of our hearts. If in the 40s and 50s and 60s they had Monster Kids, I think our generation had Starlog Kids. I was Starlog Kids. So we've got a great crew to talk all about it, and we'll start with.
Me, Kirby Bartlett Sloan. I used to be one of the co-hosts on the 20 Megabyte Doctor Who podcast, which unfortunately we stopped doing for 13 years. But I've been a fan for 50 years, so these are all mine.
Do you own every single issue?
Yeah.
Do you have every single issue?
No, I couldn't afford. I was 16 when that one came out, and I was barely able to afford those.
My collection, I only have about 60 of them, I think, myself.
60?
So, but there are some people here at the end that do have every single one.
Oh, yeah?
Wow. All right, my name is Nayar. I'm the co-host of the Starpod Log podcast, as well as the Starpod Trek podcast. Along with my wife, yes, we do own every single issue of Starlog magazine from 1 to 374. Plus, there are a plethora of side projects that Starlog got involved in. They had different annuals, they had yearbooks, they had photo publications. We're still working on getting all of those. We absolutely love collecting. We are storehouses of information, and we view ourselves as Starlog historians because these are documents of our lives. We grew up with Starlog magazine, as I'm sure many of you did. Why? Because Starlog was our internet before the internet. That's where we found out about everything cool in sci-fi fantasy.
I'm Gavora. I'm the co-host of the Starpod Log podcast and Starpod Trek, where we go through every issue of Starlog. And I was introduced to Starlog by my older brother because he was a big sci-fi fan, and he collected Starlog. I think my first issue I saw was around number 16, and I just thought it was great. It was a wonderful magazine that had all the news that I wanted, and I also went back and ordered, I know I back ordered the very first issue because once I saw that, it was advertised in all the issues, and I was like, oh, I definitely have to get that one because it's Star Trek based.
I think my first one was issue 12. So I came on a little late after a couple of years, but yeah, throughout the late 70s and early 80s, for a few years there, it was required viewing. And yeah, a lot of magazines at that time for people were disposable. Starlog was not disposable. You don't mess with my Starlog because not only are you getting the latest news about what's happening, but it's also full of great interviews, look behind the scenes, great columns. I'm sure we'll talk about all this stuff, and photos, so that you can look at it over and over and over again. It was just a sort of when I did finally get it, so that it was coming to my house every month. That was like a special day. When Starlog came, it was like, this is the day. This is a good day. Everything else is off the table. I'm going to be reading my Starlog.
I never subscribed. I always just bought them at my local bookstore.
You know, they did have subscription services.
Yeah.
You can have it come to you.
This is the first one I bought, me too.
I didn't trust it. I didn't trust it to, like, it would be difficult to find.
Yes.
I lived in a very small town in Massachusetts, you know, and I knew because I was a comic collector too, a comic reader, and I knew from month to month, sometimes the books you wanted were not there. And so, you know, you were just at the grocery store or the drugstore, wherever you would get them, and sometimes they had them, sometimes they didn't. So it was really, you couldn't guarantee anything as far as all that goes. There was no direct market at that point, other than subscribing.
And especially if it had what I call the money shot covers, there were some covers that were so spectacular. Those are the ones, if the newsstand only got 5 copies, 5 copies would sell. Because they were reporting on something that was super hot, super popular.
Well, I was lucky because my girlfriend's mother worked at the bookstore. So she would hold one. She would hold them for me.
Hey Mike, is it alright we start the roots of Starlog? And
Absolutely. I was gonna say,
just get an idea of
absolutely.
where it came from?
Let's get into the history of it. But before we do that, I just want to see who we're talking to out there, who either subscribed or grew up with Starlog here, who is very familiar with Starlog magazine. Okay, so over
I
half.
subscribe, which is why I don't have a complete collection, because the mailman didn't deliver one.
Oh! I want to say, we gave a panel some years ago at a convention in Huntsville, and it really made my heart sing because we had teenagers, 13, 14, 15 years old, and they said they came because they wanted to hear what life was like before the internet. Which is a good thing. Yeah, they're like, how did you know about? Like, that doesn't even make sense to me that there were conventions back then, and that's when we said, okay, we've got to reshuffle how we present Starlog. It did not start in 1976. So let's talk about the history of fandom. Our earliest fandoms. So let's do it, baby doll. So I mean, we're talking about, look at that, in the 1930s, right? Amazing stories. There was a small subset of people who had a desire for speculative fiction. Primarily, they wanted to see what life would be like in the future. And these are often called cults, as will continue throughout the years. It was a literary fan base. They were constantly meeting up. There were conventions. We know that WorldCon, things of that sort. They wanted to talk about what life was like. Yeah, where's the clicker, please? Okay. They wanted to see were there other fans that wanted to look at the future and the possibilities. So we look at these types of pulps. So this is the groundwork of building up fan base for science fiction. And oftentimes there were writers that would put their literary works, smaller short stories as well as sequential stories, in these magazines. Famously, Frank Herbert was releasing Dune in this format. Something amazing though did come out. To your point, Mike, Famous Monsters of Filmland magazine became a phenomenon in the 1950s and 60s. This is what it was all about. People thought about science fiction and fantasy and things, especially going to the next step. Not talking about the literary works, we're talking about movies, right? This is it. Forrest J. Ackerman. He was the ultimate collector, the ultimate science fiction nerd. It was a passion project for him. And any people who love, obviously we're at Monsterama, any love for Famous Monsters of Filmland?
Yeah.
Of course.
I've met Ford twice.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome.
Oh, you saw him at Dragon Con?
No.
Oh, okay.
Years before.
We have a friend that actually went to his house and he said it was absolutely amazing because he was one of us. He was not only a publisher, but he was a fan. And I think that's a critical moment in history to just think about that. Famous Monster Filming within time started branching out. It wasn't just monsters. Why? Because look what was going on in the movies in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. The Planet of the Apes phenomenon. Westworld. Then the Fantastic came out, right? Now we're taking because honestly, Famous Monsters of Family, as fun as it was, it really didn't have great articles. It was written for 5th and 6th graders. Cinefantastique brought it up a level. Now you have true literary work showing what went behind the scenes of science fiction. But there were some publishers, now this is the crazy thing. These two guys were publishers in the soap opera magazine industry. But they loved Star Trek. And they said, what if we could produce a magazine that's all about Star Trek? So they came up with this idea of making a Star Trek magazine. But they realized that, wait a second, we can't do that. We don't have the legal rights to Star Trek. But what we can do is we can make a Star something magazine that has a lot of Star Trek in it, but we're going to put other things that we like in there as well. At first, it started out with just science fiction, movies, books, comics. It started developing and going more into action movies. Started doing fantasy. Started talking about video games. Because of their love for Star Trek, and because of the phenomena of Star Trek, and that is the fanzines that were all over the place. They put all this in a blender in 1976, and that's when Starlog magazine #1 hit the newsstand.
It's a gorgeous cover.
Isn't that beautiful?
Yeah.
That painted cover? So if we look at that, now think about it. It is a Star Trek focused magazine, but for legal reasons, they spoke about The Bionic Woman, Space 1999. Music, David Bowie. They started talking about Kiss, as well as Yes, Rush. They realized that science fiction wasn't just the movies and books. There was far more to the fandom. And then the phenomena of Star Wars came out. This is really what put Starlog on the map, because Starlog was reporting on it before anybody else was. I want to take a moment to read this excerpt in Starlog magazine issue #2. This is credited as the first publicity for Star Wars ever in print. Would you like to read that, Kirby?
Oh, go ahead.
I don't want to be the one talking all the time. Or you want to read it? It's somebody else.
So this is on, this is issue 2.
1976. Nobody knew this was coming.
Page 7 at the bottom, and it continues to the next page. Star Wars 20th Century Fox is currently completing the filming of their latest science fiction blockbuster, Star Wars, without any parts of the film even previewed yet. Some critics have already heralded Star Wars as everything in science fiction you've ever wanted to see on the screen, but knew no one would ever put it there. Star Wars is written and directed by George Lucas, and they're responsible for THX 1138 and American Graffiti. Producer Gary Kurtz, working with an $8 million budget, has taken Star Wars on location to both Tunisia and London. Star Wars is about a galaxy-wide civil war set in the distant future. Well, it's not.
This is what's fantastic. Let's break it down sentence by sentence. A galactic civil war in the distant future, and
when Earth and its past have been entirely forgotten. Sir Alec Guinness plays an old renegade who was a great general in the first Galactic Wars, and it's in italics first. Mark Hamill plays the film's starring role, Luke Starkiller, a young adventurer. Stuart Freeman, the man who designed the spectacular 8 costumes for 2001 Space Odyssey, has created several alien designs and makeups for Star Wars' large cast. In addition to its basic science fiction format, Star Wars will also contain elements of fantasy. Star Wars reportedly won't be ready for release until early 1977, but for those of you who can't wait that long to find out more, Valentine Books plans to put out a novelization of the movie in bookstores sometime this fall.
the book scheduled for fall 1976. Now let's just break this down for a second. Again, no internet. The mass media is not reporting on anything like this. What would you think if you read that blurb about what Star Wars was going to be? Any thoughts?
Not when it turned out to be.
Yeah, but at the time we didn't know that. Like,
Yeah.
So does it sound like a movie you would want to see?
And that's okay.
Did the book actually come out in the fall?
Yes.
It did.
It did.
And the comic books came out of the adaptation before the movie.
Now, did the
This
book,
would never happen now. Never.
was it, because I've known that's been the case sometimes when they come out before, they're not, they've changed stuff when by the time, so did it match up well with the movie?
They
or-
did change some things, but nothing that's so different that it's drastic. But isn't that wild to think that Starlog was getting on, that they were building momentum just before. The timing of this magazine was perfect because they were there before Star Wars was a phenomenon. And they were credited as reporting on it, and they were consistently having reports on Star Wars. The first, I'd say, dozen issues, they were scrambling for content because think about where you were, what was on TV in 1976, 1977, 1978. With regards to film and television, how much current science fiction was there? There was some, but it wasn't filled. So the earlier issues were kind of like the famous Monsters of Film, Liam. They were talking about George Powell movies. They were talking about Ray Bradbury books. But once you get Star Wars rolling, what happened? It was all the copycats coming from Star Wars, right? Right? And then, speaking about copycats, what did the publishing world do? Because Starlog, because it became so popular.
Yes.
Do you remember all the copycat magazines that there were because of Starlog's success?
This was called Science Fantasy Film Classics. I had various other imitators as well.
And I know we talked about, just briefly, we talked about how beautiful the first two covers, not only the Star Trek cover, but the Space 1999 cover, painted cover that's in the issue 2 is really beautiful. I think after that they switch over to photos, mostly.
Yes.
Which is, I feel like that's unfortunate. I love the painted cover so
I
much. but
100% agree.
I always stayed stuck with that. But I have to give them props because right from the first issue to the last, to even, nowadays, this logo, I think is just beautifully designed.
And the font was created just for that.
I can
Yeah,
imagine
you
it.
need
It's
font.
just, it's just perfect, and it just fits so well. The naming of the magazine, Starlog, obviously it comes from Star Trek, Captain's Log, that kind of thing. So it is inspired by that, but it stands out on its own, and I think the design was really perfect too. So it was really, it's one of those things that it was a perfect storm, like that just happened. They had it at the right time.
Absolutely. Again, we're talking about lightning in the bottle, perfect timing. Now, you have a superhero movie, big budget, hitting the screens. It had Marlon Brando in this movie, and to the average person, that was the big deal. You had a famous character, but also an incredible actor. Starlog was there. Now we're seeing that Starlog start saying, wait a second, we can't just report on science fiction. We have to start branching out because our readers don't just like science fiction. And this is, all of us have talked about this before. Starlog knew what we wanted. It wasn't just science fiction, but fantasy was important. Superheroes were important. Check this out, the things that they were talking about. They even went to the history of Superman, talking about Kirk Allen. So you talk about the serials. NASA's drive into spacecraft. What do science fiction fans tend to like? We care about the real world space program, right? Starlog was still feeling, what do the fans want? And I say this is one of the reasons why this is Gen X's magazine for geeks that defines us, because you like so many things, and Starlog just put it in the blender and flushed it out.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
Just
Well, for a while, we also had Future, which was the spin-off.
Future Life was a
Yes.
spin-off. Yes, that's absolutely true.
I have only a few issues
Yeah.
left.
And we're at the point now that I'm glad you brought that up, because Starlog was a magazine. Within time, it would become a publishing empire. They had something called Cinemagic. And Cinemagic was a magazine that's under Starlog's banner that talked about behind the scenes. We're on Monsterama, we can't forget. Fangoria. Fangoria was designed to go head to head against Famous Monsters of Filmland. By the early 80s, Famous Monsters had to go out of business, or he couldn't keep up with what was currently, what people cared about currently. He was still stuck in the Universal Monster era, whereas Fangoria filled that gap. Future Life magazine was all about, it was more like an Omni competitor.
I was going to say, that one compares to Omni. Yeah, those were the, Omni was like the real hard science magazine.
Yes. Starlog Publications started making, and you have an example of it here, they would have photo guides. Remember, this is the era where the average person did not have a VCR. So if you want to look at cool photos from your favorite movies, you got a guide with photos on them. They also had guides for television programs.
They did,
I think she had to order, right? They were not in stores. I remember ordering those. Yeah.
Yeah, they had poster magazines as well, so.
Absolutely, I
If you wanted
had,
to
my room
decorate
was
your wall.
filled, yes, my room was filled with those posters from Starlog magazine, and they were just poster magazines. Now, because we're doing so well with what they're publishing, they said, hey, let's branch out a little bit. The MTV era started coming along in the early 80s. People can't believe it until they fact-check me. There was something called Rock Video magazine, produced by Starlog. Hard Rock magazine, produced by Starlog. Country Rhythm magazine, produced by Starlog. They were just public, whatever they could find that they think people would buy, Starlog was making it.
Didn't they had a comic-centric magazine?
Yeah,
as well.
Comic Scene.
Right?
It was called the Starlog Comic Scene, which was fantastic. They were saying, if our fans like this, they'll probably like this. If they like this, they'll probably like this. Not all of them were very successful. I mean, some just lasted a handful of issues. But they really tried to figure out what did science fiction fans like. Do you have, anybody have any fond memories of any of these magazines? I know Fangoria, there has to be Fangoria fans.
Well, Fangoria got so big it flipped the script, right? Because then Fangoria bought Starlog. I think Fangoria owns Starlog now.
Because of Starlog, went out of business in the 2000s, after a while, the Fangoria fans got together and bought the name Fangoria. And currently, there is somebody that recently bought the name Starlog. So they're looking at publishing
I
Starlog.
saw Fangoria within the last year, as far as I know.
You can still buy Fangoria, yeah. There's a resurface of Fangoria magazine. Yep.
And Starlog is making a comeback as well. There's a team on it. They've announced plans to publish a magazine later this year, as well as they're putting out video and audio podcast content.
Which I think is a curiosity. So you look at by the mid-80s, Starlog Enterprises was pretty much printing money. They were even advertising. They were making so much money that there were advertisements on TV. Do you know what it's like? Outside of People magazine, Time magazine, Newsweek, to have a geek magazine advertised on national television is wild to consider. I think that's very impressive in itself. But the fact that this magazine started out with the idea of wanting to be a Star Trek magazine, it took some time, but Gene Roddenberry ended up being a fan of Starlog. He was very supportive of it. George Lucas, very supportive of it. The people who are making these productions realize there's no magazine out there that cares about our products more than this geeky magazine. Sure, we'll get Time and Newsweek if we're making a lot of money, but all the articles in those magazines, it was about how long the lines are, how it's a blockbuster, and how much money is being made. They didn't care about the characters. It was a story about the characters, the developments. Whereas Starlog was made for us, and I think that's what separated them from the rest.
the craziest thing about this, to me, the whole birth of Starlog, as you pointed out, it's by two guys who were really into Star Trek and wanted to produce a Star Trek magazine. Star Trek was not airing at that time, except in syndication. It was a dead show. There was no guarantee there was ever going to be any new Star Trek to come. I know that's a hard thing to imagine right now, but so here's two guys going, we want to make a magazine about a show that's been canceled for about 5 years, and we don't know if there's ever going to be new ones. I mean, that just doesn't look like, I mean, if you're a bank, you're like, yeah, no, I'm not financing that, right?
Yeah.
And they take the chance. Now, it was getting a resurgence because of syndication, and there were a lot of shows like Lost in Space, like Batman, like a lot of the shows from the 60s that were getting like a resurgence because of the syndication. A lot of access to older science fiction movies were kind of a big deal. So it wasn't just out of the blue that they were like, let's do this, because there was a growing fandom. Because as you pointed out, that's when the first like Star Trek convention started, because fans were like, we really love this show and we want to share our experience with it. And that's
Star Trek convention reports. Yeah, you're right.
That's the cover I was thinking of.
Yeah, and they would put lists
That's,
of where you could go to conventions.
Yeah.
Normal magazines did not have lists of where you could go to conventions. Starlog did.
Yeah, it was like that cover, that copy of the magazine where I discovered that conventions existed, along with David Gerald's paperback,
Yes.
what's it called? The World of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he did the Trouble with Tribble,
Yes.
was all about the Trouble with Tribble. And he had a monthly column.
And he had a monthly column, and
Yes.
that's how I really, like for me, I wasn't just a fan of, I was a fan, but I wanted more. Like I pretty much knew when I was growing up watching these things that I wanted to participate, that I wanted to be a storyteller, that I wanted to be in film or TV or some sort of media. And what Starlog did was, even the other like press organizations would cover the sensational part of it. Like, let's talk to the actors, let's like get the skinny on this or whatever. But they didn't go in depth as to how these things were being made. They didn't treat it seriously. But Starlog talked to the directors, the writers, the art directors, like the people who were putting together the special effects. They really gave you a behind-the-scenes look at a lot of not just current movies, but past movies and shows, so that you really could learn a lot about the industry, and not just the fluff pieces about who was hot and who was So that, I thought it was instrumental from that point of view, and I think all of us growing up got that experience too. We knew how things were being made, and we appreciate them a bit more, I think.
This is issue 8, and the cover is of a novel person doing Raiders of the Lost, showing how they're
On the
doing it.
cover.
On the cover.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And there's an article, Model Animation, Behind the Scenes of Ray Harryhausen and Other Tabletop Guys.
And we go back to the roots again. Terry O'Quinn wanted a Star Trek magazine. Well, guess what? In the 80s, he was doing a lot of reporting on everything. Of course, Star Trek was always going to be there. It was mind-blowing to me. Gremlins, Ghostbusters, Conan. They were branching out. They were totally branching out, which was absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Well, it was also the era that there were more of these genre-type movies as well. So the industry and the magazine could feed off of each other, and it just became like this thing that blew up.
Yeah.
But once Next Generation came out, that was the game changer for Starlog, because now, within 10 years, these publishers, they were giants in the publishing industry for genre film and genre television. Now the studios were seeking them out. Instead of them begging for material, the studios were saying, please, you are the lifeline for this community. And they were able to produce their own Star Trek magazine, finally, an officially licensed Star Trek magazine for the next generation. And the next generation, Starlog's Star Trek Next Generation magazine, was published well into the 90s. And does anybody remember those Star Trek Next Generation specific magazines that were published by Starlog?
Yeah. I remember they had synapses of each of the episodes. They came out quarterly, I think, is that right?
Yeah, because they wanted to make sure all the episodes were covered.
Yeah. And so they would have, it was basically my early episodes. I have a logbook of those early episodes of Next Generation.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yep, that's true. So today, to say that Paramount cared about Starlog as a magazine was an understatement, because now they've had their blessing to do something official for Star Trek. Well, magazine was published well into the 90s, and they were jumping in on everything that was popular. Early on, you wouldn't see anything, and we kind of joked about it. What was one of the biggest movies of 1976 when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy? Does anybody remember?
It was 70, probably 75.
76. We're talking Moneymaker. Logan's Run was popular. King Kong. King Kong was hugely popular. Starlog missed the boat on that. It wasn't science fiction, right? They were looking for, they were trying to figure out still what their audience was. By this time in the 1990s, look at what they were reporting on. Deep Space Nine, Star Wars trading cards. They were going into the collectible hobby. They were realizing that it wasn't just the movies and TV shows, but the collectibles were important to talk about too. And I was so glad that, because Jurassic Park really brought a lot of people into our essentially our lifestyle. This was another generation. Starlog wasn't going to be like Famous Monsters of Film. They were going to constantly refresh themselves to be able to draw in new readers. Any thoughts on that? I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
I must admit, I started to bow out a little bit around this time. Yeah, I think I had a lot more stuff going on, and I don't know why. That I guess maybe information on a lot of this stuff, because it was more mainstream, was a little bit more easier to get. So I can't speak to the quality of the reporting and everything that they did, but in the 90s I was out of college and trying to get stuff done.
Caught up in the real world.
My comic collecting stuff a little bit too, a little bit. So because the budget was a little bit tighter. But yeah.
So it wasn't expensive, man. I'm glad you brought that up. It was far more expensive than the average magazine. It just was.
Well, this is not 50.
Specialized magazine.
Back then.
Yeah, and Starlog was, it definitely, I think it was selling less during these years, just because you could buy, this is all mainstream stuff, so you could buy magazines, other magazines that reported on the same thing.
True. And it's interesting that you know that magazine sales started to dip by the mid-1990s. Why do you think that is?
Internet and cable.
Cable, maybe.
Interesting and we looked at the publishing sales and rates for mid-90s and what was selling more, what was selling less. Anything dealing with computers, electronics, science fiction, movies and TV that was genre specific, sales started going down in the mid-1990s, directly because of the internet, because there were bulletin boards, there were message boards. People were getting their information so quickly. You know which magazines were the last ones to start going down in sales? I'm not making this up. Sports magazines. And my dad was a sports guy, to the day he died, he was still getting the newspaper. He didn't want to look at the internet to get, and he wanted, and I said, yeah, that's kind of curious, because being a collector, I still love the physicality of collecting. I still collect comic books. I want the real comics. I don't want it online. But it's a curiosity, looking at the purchasing habits of geeks compared to, well, normies. Any thoughts on that?
No, you're right. I mean, like I said, magazines in our house, I mean, regular magazines were just considered disposable. Whether it was, Good Housekeeping or, the only issues of Sports Illustrated that hung around for a long time were the swimsuit edition. So, I don't know why. So it was, so I know that my parents were like, why are you keeping all these magazines? Like, and it's because I keep looking at them, I keep them. So, but I will say,
Kirby, why do you still have all these magazines?
Because I'm a kid.
because I don't throw away anything. I'm the same way.
Yeah, I've been collecting this stuff since I was 15, so. And one thing, it's just an aside, this is just weird, a quote number sitting on here, because I saw it says Kelly Free's art. Kelly Free's was a very famous artist. He did a lot of Alfred E. Newman covers for Mad and stuff.
I did the album cover for the Queen album.
Queen album, yeah.
Which,
Based on a
One of
previous.
The news of the world?
But,
Yeah.
but, this thing says Kelly Free's art, and they have down here, Starlog is delighted to present for the first time in our magazine the artwork of Frank Kelly Freeze. This painting of rocket ship X-Man was executed specifically for this featured spread. But then I opened it up, and I actually have Kelly's autograph on this
Isn't that awesome?
which I forgot. Yeah, that is Kelly Freeze touched the same thing.
And I also think too, and look, I know that it might not be a popular opinion, but I think Starlog in the 90s, I saw like as a step down, because I think there was some more prestigious. You mentioned in the beginning one of the copycats, quote unquote, was Cinepatast Speak. Man, I really, in the 90s, I think I was more.
It was deep. They were super deep dives into the behind.
Yeah, and they would do episode guides of shows, and they were really comprehensive. They had nice, beautiful painted covers. Also, Cinefex magazine. So we really wanted.
And they would do just one movie.
Yeah, and they would do a deep dive into like, here's behind the scenes on how this movie was made, and it was so those sort of specialty things where I think. If I'm gonna spend my dollar, those seem to be like more reliable purchases than because, as you pointed out, I mean, what was new, what was coming out, and everything was pretty much now mainstream.
Yes. Yeah. Starlog continued to be published throughout the 90s, and they were tapping into every fandom they thought geeks would like. X-Files, Sequest, RoboCop. Babylon 5 was obvious, that's science fiction. I know Jen's a big X-Files fan. Didn't that shake up the whole science fiction world during the 90s? It was so different.
It was different. I don't think I ever got Starlog, but I do have like probably 100 copies of there was an X-Files magazine.
Yeah.
Which really.
I have to double check to see who published that.
I wonder who published it. But it was interesting because yesterday I saw in the screening room Night Stalker. That it was a TV movie in 1972. Which, if you watch the X-Files DVDs with the ones that have the commentary from Chris Carter, the creator, and some of the other producers and writers, he talks about how that, because I got made into a TV show, Kolchak. That was like his major influence on the X-Files. And I was born in 1975, so that was before I was born, and wasn't rerunning. I'd never seen it, but I had known for all these years that was a major influence on him, so I always wanted to see it. And so,
There was an X-Files episode with Darren McGavin.
Yeah, and there was-
He was supposed to get
yeah.
Kolchak, but they couldn't get him the right.
X-Files magazine was published by Manga Entertainment.
Okay. So I'm going through my head saying, I don't own any X-Files magazine, that's why, it's the evil enemy, it's not the X-Files. Surely I only own Starlog
I do
publications.
remember mine, because there were a lot of those too. There was almost every genre TV series had their own magazine. Buffy had its own magazine.
Yeah, by that time it was, you're right.
Star Trek had their own magazine.
That
Star
was
Wars
fine.
had, the
Star Wars Insider.
right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of them. I'm surprised because I was thinking that Topps magazines put out the X-Files one, but I know Topps magazines put out a lot of them too.
Topps had a Star Wars Galaxy magazine,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
it says from issue 19 on, it was published by Titan magazines.
okay.
So,
So that's the British one. Yeah,
The original run was with Manga.
Makes
But
sense.
the magazines for TV shows, I mean, they were, one day canceled, once the TV show was canceled.
Yes,
They go away.
Yeah.
for the
I had
most part,
to-
yes.
Holiday.
Oh, really? That's curious. And guess what? There was more interest in Starlog than ever before in the late 90s because of what? Star Wars was bringing the average, ordinary, everyday space adventure thing into this unique format of getting news and looking at pictures. So Starlog didn't go away just because of the internet. They were reporting on a lot of Disney stuff too, which I thought was interesting. I specifically remember going into a Walden Books and they had a cover article about the Tarzan movie. And I'm just looking at it going, why are we having Tarzan movies? But then you realize Disney fans are crazy. They will buy everything Disney. And Starlog one, they were in business to stay in business.
I have a Starlog magazine. I know I have it in my collection, but Greystoke's on the cover. So it's not.
Oh,
the
it's a
first
good
time-
article too. It's really good.
It's not the first time
Really
Tarzan
interesting.
was ever on the cover of Starlog.
I just think having it Disney, to me, Disney is just so kid-oriented, right? To have Starlog now reporting on Disney movies on a major cover, but they have print magazines, and that is geeky, right? I mean, you go to DragonCon, and there's a whole group of Disney people that just. So I get it. Why Starlog Publishing kept branching out, and it was necessary. But again, Star Wars, awesome articles about Episode 1. And you want to talk about people wanting rumors, people wanting interviews. You had a whole generation of fans that were now wanting to read about what their moms and dads watched. They were interested in it. So I think it was smart. How do they keep refreshing things?
Yeah, this is also the time though where the internet really makes an impact on all sorts of magazines and print, because especially for Star Wars, because I remember you had countingdown.com that was like literally built to count down to the Star Wars movie, and that became a huge, I don't know if it's still around, but they became a huge source of all things, like all things that were geeky and blockbustery and that kind of thing. So I think we're also starting to see now where, all print magazines are going to suffer from that, because with the internet coming into now, everybody's using it.
Yes. Yeah, but by this time, most households have access to a computer to some degree. Over 50% of households have access to a computer.
Dial-up.
Yep. Back up. What people ask, well, what happened into the 2000s? What happened after this era? It really, really changed because of the computer industry, and also because Starlog, they sold it. They sold the name. The format of the magazine did change. It wasn't as good. I'm telling you, as somebody who reads them, it was there, it was news, but it didn't have the passion that the earlier issues did. If you're looking at collecting Starlog magazine, the issues from 300 on are far more difficult to find because of that fact. The publishing numbers were low. Newsstands weren't ordering it, and Walmart wasn't getting it, Target wasn't getting it, drugstores weren't getting it. They were sold primarily in comic book stores and through mail subscriptions. I want thoughts on that. Anybody have any thoughts on the reality of it?
The last issue I have in my collection is 300. And I remember buying it because it was 300. And I was like, oh yeah, Starlog.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, 300. I'm like, all right. Because we talked a little bit about some of the special stuff, but one of the things I used to get, even though I, subscribe, I used to also get Best of Starlog magazine,
Yes.
the compilations that they would put out, like the annuals or whatever, that would have like all the interviews that they did throughout the year from interviewing everybody, and it was just a nice, and it was a heavier stock paper.
It was, yeah.
So that it just felt like it was more prestigious and more of a collector's item. Because the magazine itself was pretty pulpy, like it's pretty like disposable. So yeah, you have to keep them in plastic.
I don't remember why I stopped buying it. I only have, I think, I stopped buying it monthly around issue 60.
Yeah.
Early to mid-80s then.
Yeah, by issue 80, 83. I think my last issue was 83. And I stopped. I was busy doing other things, and it wasn't that important anymore. Now, one thing you did not bring up was Starlog stores.
Starlog did have stores. You're right. Yes. Talk about it.
Well,
I've never been to a Starlog store, but from what I understand, they were in malls.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like a Spencer shop. If anybody remembers Spencer stores, sold t-shirts.
And this Spencer's.
Yeah, I never visited a Starlog store, but I don't know how we got connected with someone that we ended up having this guy come over to our house to talk about Starlog wanted to expand the stores countrywide, because at the time they had just a few.
Correct.
In
And they were deemed nonprofit.
yeah, New Jersey, Phoenix, near Lowell, America.
Yes.
But he came and discussed with us stock they were going to have a stock offering for Starlog, but mainly for the stores. And we invested. And we didn't lose our shirts because we didn't invest that much. But it did not go. They did not expand.
Well, the one thing I hear that was the worst place was at Underground Atlanta.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd love to hear about this. What was your experience at
I don't even know what it
Starlog
was,
store?
and it was a totally unmemorable experience. You know, like when we met.
Yeah,
Oh, that was the Starlog store, went in and walked around and left.
we loved the idea. This guy was pitching it to us at our kitchen table. We really
And
wanted
the pictures I've seen, it seemed unimpressive. And I think part of it had to do with the time period.
Yeah.
Geek was not chic in the 80s. It's not
No,
like
this
it
was
is
nice.
now.
This was
That was the
nice.
90s.
Oh, I was thinking late 80s, so it was by the 90s they had all
Mid-90s.
stores.
This would have been sometime between 94.
Again, geek still wasn't cheap.
Ninety-
It's not like now. You go to Walmart now, there's entire DC, Marvel, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It just wasn't like that back then.
Yeah, this would have been no later than 97, because I remember sitting at that kitchen table and.
I'm
we
surprised it
knew
was that late.
97. So it was probably between 95 and 97.
I think you're right. It was the 90s.
Interesting.
I feel like the transition based on Dragon Con memories was when Buffy actually started to get popular. That's when geeks started to become more positively accepted, because I remember the one year I went to Dragon Con, it was perfectly normal. I could go to any panel I wanted to. I had no issues getting into any games. The next year they had Spike from Buffy there.
Yep.
And you literally could not go from the top floor to the bottom floor because the middle floor was completely packed out with people. So, like, the point I think where that transition occurred and geek kind of became chic was around the time Buffy the Vampire Slayer was popular, at least in my my experience.
What does anybody
Wait, what?
remember going into a Walmart and just seeing so much Marvel and DC stuff? I would say the 2000s. Probably with the Iron Man movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it's just, you can't go anywhere without some of this stuff.
Yeah, I was at a convention, RiverCon, I believe it was, that's Louisville. I believe it was 1986, somewhere around there. And we went to a panel that had Tom Savini,
Oh, great.
the makeup guy, and Dan O'Bannon. There were 5 people in the audience. People who knew who they were, but it wasn't, they weren't known, and it wasn't
Yeah.
that sort of a thing. It was, even though it was after Alien.
It's kind of curious too, we're talking about Starlog being a publishing empire. I'm glad that you brought it up about the stores. They tried to do the stores. Starlog also tried to do conventions.
Yeah.
And they just, and I don't understand why it didn't work. They're credited with having the first ever Star Wars convention in 1987 for the 10th anniversary of Star Wars. And the wild thing about it was Gene Roddenberry showed up. And it's the only time ever where Gene Roddenberry and George Lucas were on the stage together, and it was unannounced. So Starlog tried to expand beyond the print, but really the only thing that was successful for a long period of time was the printed page. Any thoughts on that? Why didn't anything else stick with them?
I mean, it's difficult to, look, I mean, lightning has to hit, right, at the right time, and you know, sometimes it's hard to translate that stuff. I will say that, so growing up, you know, it was always, fandom was, you know, they seem to, people seem to think that, you know, fandom being divisive is a relatively new thing. It is, growing up, it was like, you like Star Wars, you like Star Trek, you like DC, you like Marvel, you like, I mean, it's always been like that. But I've always enjoyed, like, I'm like, why can't I enjoy everything?
Same way, we're the same way. We're bisexual.
And I think, you know, Starlog magazine was something I could relate to because they did embrace everything. Like, there was everything in Starlog. And, you know, when I started going to conventions, it was like, here's a comic convention, it's comic centric. Here's a Star Trek convention, it's Star Trek centric. Here's this convention, right? It wasn't until I moved to Atlanta and went to my first Dragon Con that I was like, oh my God, this is like, this is like Starlog magazine, like for, I mean, everybody's here. And you can embrace whatever fandoms that you like. And if you just like a little bit of, you know, a little bit of this or a little bit of that, you can go there, you can hang out with the Star Wars people all you want, or you can diversify, and it's just beautiful. I really felt like that was my tribe, but as we've noticed, that it's not an easy thing to pull off. I mean, because as all the other conventions have shown, they're not all like Dragon Con. And Dragon Con is a unique thing, and you know, how it came to be, and it's celebrating the anniversary this year too, which is 40. So you know, I think that it's interesting to look at both of those things, and I think I hope that when the people who have Starlog now learn to embrace the diversity of fandom, and I'm not talking about like being like woke or whatever. I'm just talking about like how many, like, you know, and bring them together instead of keeping them separate. Because I think, you know, we don't need anything more to keep things separate, because that's already, you know, my personal opinion, that's a big problem. So.
We had a listener that said to me once, I don't know why you guys are talking about video games so much. This is supposed to be science fiction. Starlog didn't talk about video games. And then you look through the issues. You know, memory's a weird thing. If you weren't interested in an article in 1984, you probably glanced over it. Guess what? When you look at Starlog magazine, they had a regular video game column at one point because video games were so popular. And same comic books. They made a comic book magazine. Starlog was there for everything.
Yeah, they did a 2-part article a Monty Python.
Exactly, yes.
We covered the history of that, and I thought, this is neat, and now it's all over Dragon Con.
Of course. That's why I think that Starlog was so unique, and that they figured out the geek formula. They figured out we like a lot of things. and we don't like to be pigeonholed just for one thing. We might have a passion in one way, but we kind of either like everything else, or we respect others who are like us, who just don't like a lot of normal things.
My wallet would appreciate it if I only liked one thing.
Isn't that the hardest thing?
My
Yes.
collecting space would appreciate it if I only liked one thing. But because I like a diverse amount of things, it's difficult. I mean, even when I've been putting together projects or podcasts, that I try to, I've always tried to make sure that we cover a lot of things and, and not just stick in one box or sandbox, but the more ground you cover, try to cover, the A, harder it is, and B, the more difficult it is to get people to come, because they, like you said, people will be like, oh, they're covering video games this week, I don't care about that. So you don't get regular viewers. But I will say that I envy you two a lot, because in a perfect world, when I was setting up our podcast that we did for a long time, about a little over 10 years, 12 years, which was Earth Station 1, I modeled it after two things. I modeled it after Dragon Con, and I modeled it after Starlog. And the reason why, well, there's two reasons that we settled on the name Earth Station 1. One is because my co-host already had that name, so that was the easiest thing to do and not change it. But also because I was like, can we get the rights to Starlog? And because I thought Starpod would be like the perfect name for that kind of thing, but that was either already taken or it wasn't available. So the fact that you guys have Starpod Log, I'm like, that is perfect, and that is exactly what we tried to do as well.
Well, thank you. A fan actually designed this logo for us and put it together and vectored it. We're very pleased that our listeners get what we try to do. We've heard some people say, why don't you talk about new things? More people like new things. I'm like, yeah, there's enough podcasts about new things. So that's okay. We'll be a little bit different. We'll talk about the stuff that we're familiar with. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I've loved sharing your memories, and I think that's what makes Monsterama so special, is this very unique community that's been built here.
Yeah, I mean, on a much smaller scale, Monsterama does the same thing. I mean, because you guys understand. It's hard for sort of newer generations to understand how important this magazine was to me or to my generation, because it's what we had. And when you're in a small community and you don't have people to talk to about this sort of thing, at least none that'll let you talk and not beat you up, you're searching for a community. You're searching for other people like you. And here's a magazine that says, hey, we're interested in this too, and other people are too, and there's a way you can communicate with them, and there's a whole community here that you're not just by yourself. And I think that's what this magazine did, and I think that's what at least the early days of podcasting did too.
Yeah, Starlog came out at the exact time that it needed to for me. I was 16 when it came out, and it fit with how geeky I was.
Totally.
It'll be interesting to see, how the new one, now that I'm wondering, because magazines just aren't popular like they used to be, so how they're gonna...
They're only sold in comic book stores, and you'll find some in Barnes & Noble, like the Fangoria that's out. It's $20 though for a
Oh my, yeah, the other thing is so expensive.
It's ludicrous. So, we're going to buy the first issue to see what it's like. Am I going to continue buying it? I don't know. I'm hoping for the best, like everything. I don't want to be negative. People have asked us, has anybody reached out to us? And the answer is no. I don't think we're amateurs. We don't do this for a living. We do this in our free time. This is a hobby. So this is going to be run by professionals, and I'm sure they're going to do a wonderful job, and they're going to try and keep it current to what people want now. They're going to have retro articles, guaranteed, the best form. But we're going to keep producing our podcast, Starlog, which is everything of the time period. Right now, we're up to 1986. So if you want to reminisce of what it was like to be a geek in 1986, listen to Starlog. Starpod Trek is our second podcast where we talk about all the Star Trek articles in Starlog magazine. We talk about what's up to be a Star Trek fan in 1986. We're 40 years now. This is the Star Trek 4 anniversary, so a lot of that content.
Anything to plug?
Yeah, I'm no longer on a.
Oh, Kirby is a contributor, by the way. We have a lot of contributors to our show. So Kirby's been on, talked about Doctor Who in the 80s.
Yeah.
You've been associated with us. We have a ton of other people, not just my wife and I. It is this community. It's, of course, Ladies Trek Library, Jen. She talks about Star Trek books. If you just love reminiscing about yesteryear, and we're a fan base, we love having fan interviews. So we'd love to hear from you. We have some trading cards as well, if anybody would like to come up and get some. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you being here.
And are you guys done paneling this weekend?
We have one more tomorrow. Yes, we're going to be part of the Star Trek Irregulars. So if you're a Star Trek fan and want to get to know the Star Trek guests that are here, we'll be on stage with them. That's where you can find us, our podcasts and our videos.
And I know Kirby's on a panel tonight.
Yes.
We're celebrating the 60th anniversary of Batman 66. One of the podcasts that I do is called Bat Chums, where we review the episodes one at a time. So we're about midway through the third season, and that's been fun. And so, yeah, we'll be celebrating the things that we love about Batman 66 tonight. And then,
I'm not on anything else.
Okay. But
I'll be
you
here
can find us. So, thanks a lot, guys.
Have a great time.
Thank you.
And somebody, I want you to take a picture of us here, please, if you can. Thanks, Doug.
Okay, recording?